It's an honor to present our work at the 2021 CARE Conference. Here's an initial question for you. What happens when you combine a team of archival empirical researchers with a well-respected behavioral researcher, Steve Salterio? The answer is you get our paper. We're looking at the impact of board environmental expertise and board social engagement on firm environmental performance. The CSR literature has established that in order to get environmental performance, you need good governance. So G comes before E. It's also established that E matters. That is, that in terms of firm valuation, it pays to be green. What hasn't been established in the CSR literature is the importance of board environmental expertise as an attribute of board governance and enhancing environmental performance. I mentioned ours is a hybrid study that borrows from behavioral insights. We're going to build up a latent construct called a director's environmental expertise and ultimately board environmental expertise from 9 observable attributes. Those attributes are on the screen, and they combine the depth and breadth of experience. And we're talking about service on the CSR committee of another firm, service on the board of another firm in environmentally sensitive industry, service as the CEO in another firm in environmentally sensitive industry, the number of environmental not-for-profit affiliations of a particular director, the environmental regulatory experience of that director, and whether that director has a PhD or law degree. Turning to board social engagement, we don't view expertise as being enough. You have to have the commitment to society to apply that expertise, that is empathy. Now, that's a term we're borrowing from applied psychology and the emotional intelligence literature. The empathy, if you like, of a focal director is unobserved, and hence it's a latent construct, but we're building that up from the 7 measures that you can see on the screen. The number of current government, military, university, and medical organization affiliations, as well as not-for-profit affiliations and number of awards. And so you see the challenge of our paper, rather than use a dichotomous approach that the director is either and has environmental expertise or social commitment from one characteristic, we're building up that latent construct from a number of characteristics. You better have a behavioral researcher on your team if you try and do something like that. We're also using structural equation modeling. You better have a behavioral researcher on your team if you're going to use that. SEM enables us to do path analysis, and in addition handles the endogeneity that board environmental expertise and board social experience are endogenous board choices. We also conduct a pooled OLS in our paper as a robustness check. Our paper is available on the CARE Conference website. Prior literature looking at board environmental expertise, Rodriguez et al. Used the dichotomous variable approach I mentioned earlier, that a director is viewed to have environmental expertise if they have one of the attributes that I referred to on the earlier screen. Using that dichotomous variable approach, they did not get an association between board environmental expertise and firm environmental performance. Turning to board social engagement, the best known paper is Hillman et al. 2001, and they identify stakeholder directors. Again, that's a dichotomous approach. You're a stakeholder director if you represent one or more stakeholder groups. And so it's an all or nothing thing. But using their dichotomous approach, they don't observe any association between being a stakeholder director or the number of such directors in the board and environmental performance. I mentioned path analysis earlier. Gov in this path refers to traditional drivers of Gov performance. And we're positing that Gov has direct effects on environmental performance. You can see that direct path, but it has hypothesized indirect effects on environmental performance working through board environmental expertise and board social engagement. We'll also explore in our comprehensive governance model the role played by the existence of a CSR committee and the appointment of a chief Sustainability Officer. Well, perhaps now you see the tension in our study. It won't be enough for us just to get that BEE and BSE matter. They have to matter incremental to the indirect effects working on those constructs through Gov. In other words, you can't get it all from just having the traditional drivers of Gov. If that was the case, what have we established? And in fact, we do establish incremental benefits to having board environmental expertise and board social expertise that you don't get from just having the traditional drivers of Gov in place. Well, with that, I'm going to turn things over to Mike Moran, who's graduating this year from our accounting PhD program at the Rotman School. Mike's going to share our results with you. Mike, over to you.
Thank you, Gord. So in regard to our sample consists of a balanced panel of 600 firms from 2010 through to 2015. We start with all S&P 1500 firms and retain only firms that have no missing variables during our 6-year period. We do this so that we can compare the evolution of the relationship over time without the confounding effects of firms entering and leaving the sample. In regard to our latent construct Gov, after exploratory factor analysis, we retain 4 of the 6 observed variables to construct Gov, which extracts 44.3% of the variance. In regard to BEE, again, after exploratory factor analysis, we retain 4 of the 14 observed variables to construct BEE that extract 65.94% of the variance. And then in regard to BSE, again, after exploratory factor analysis, we retain 9 of the 14 variables that extract 47.28% of the variance. This is actually considered quite good for a new measure. In regard to our dependent variable measuring firm environmental performance, we rely on the EN score produced by Asset4. Importantly, the Asset4 methodology is such that percentile ranks are calculated relative to other peers in the firm's industry sector, which implies that our scores can be readily pooled across industries without the need for further adjustment. Before I get into the results, just a little bit about our SEM fit. So our squared multiple correlations for the EN dependent variable and for our latent variables when measured in the context of our model indicate strong explanatory power. Our residual mean square error is below 0.05, which indicates an excellent model, which therefore allows us to use and rely on SEM to test our hypotheses. So just in regard to Gov, we see that we have a total effect of 29.06. This really comes from the idea that SEM allows for the estimation of indirect effects. So by calculating the indirect effects from our model in figure 1 that Gord had alluded to, we can estimate this total effect for each explanatory variable on firm environmental performance. And the total effect is the summation of direct and indirect effects. So given that Gov has a 29.06% increase, that implies that a 1 standard deviation increase in Gov increases 29.06% increase in 1 standard deviation of EN. And we just take this as a corroboration of prior research whereby G impacts E. In regard to BEE, we see a total effect of 21.9%. And importantly, only a small portion comes from traditional Gov, so thus BEE matters as a standalone feature of board governance quality. In terms of BSC, we have a 4.17% total effect on EN. So again, although not as strong as BEE, it still matters as a standalone feature of board governance quality. In terms of CSO and CSR committee, we see a strong impact of CSO on EN. We don't see such a strong impact of CSR committee on EN, but we hypothesize that this is because BEE is already in the model and service on CSR committees of other firms loads so heavily in constructing our BEE latent construct. So in regard to our conclusion, using a comprehensive governance model, we demonstrate that in addition to traditional governance drivers, board environmental expertise, and board social engagement enhance firm environmental performance in a manner that complements the board's establishment of a CSR committee and appointment of a CSO. We really thank you for giving us this opportunity to present our paper, and we look forward to any comments and feedbacks that you have. Thank you.